Hello. So last time we started making a weapon system, and it's not quite done yet. There's a couple of things I want to add. So I actually wrote a list of things that we might do in the near future. This is not going to be a completely accurate list of all the episodes we'll do and the order we'll do them. But today I want to let us collect and switch weapons. So right now, like all the weapons are on the player all the time. We have to manually in the editor disable or drag the right one to the right slot to make it to switch weapons. That's ridiculous. We've got to have an actual button for that. And then have them lying around on the floor and you can pick them up. And then the others, these are just some ideas that, I don't know if I'll stick to them, but when I come to practice doing episodes on these things, we'll find out whether they're actually going to happen or not. But I wrote this list partly because sound and feel is this thing that's always on my mind when we look at our game, because it's really lacking in those departments, and those are pretty important. But I'm also feeling like maybe it's better to get the shape of the game in there. Like, what kind of game is it? Is it a stealth game? Is it an action game? How do those two things interplay if they do? What's your objective? Is what we've made level 1? Or is this just a test chamber and the levels will look totally different, that kind of thing. And feel is arguably sort of like less fundamental than that, but it's still really important. So it's among the next 5 things I want to do. That's all I can say about it. First order of business is last time I had a bug that I was curious about. I'll show it to you again. And I, rather than actually, I tried to find it, but I couldn't, so I just asked you guys, because I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. Because these bursts of shotgun fire seem to have a bias to them. If some of them go right, they all go right. And if they're all sort of in a group, but the groups themselves vary. And I couldn't figure out what that was, but commenter Mislav Pozek figured it out, and probably other people did too, but Mislav was the first one I saw, so thank you, Mislav. It's because our weapon script, which I'll open now, it's one of those bugs where it's a nice bug, because as soon as someone tells you what the problem is, you're like, oh yeah, of course. It makes immediate sense. It's proper stupidity on my part. There are others. Hopefully these will be rare, but there are times when a bug takes you days to fix, and when you fix it, you're like, I still don't really know why that was happening. Like, I know what I had to change to fix it, but I don't know why that fixed it, and I don't know why it was going wrong, and stuff like that. So our issue is, the reason you're seeing a bias in each batch of bullets is that I was getting hung up on this random range thing. Like, that's definitely, each time, we're definitely getting a new range of inaccuracy. So one iteration can't influence the next one, right? Well, it can, because what are we adding that randomness onto? We're adding it onto target position. Target position is something that gets passed into this function. Remember, it's player. When player calls the fire script, they say where we want to fire, and it's the cursor position. Weapon takes that as an argument, but it's not sort of fixed in stone. When you take something as an argument, it's really just like declaring a variable. If I just wrote, it's going to hate me for doing this, but if I just wrote to vector 3 target position up here, we've defined a variable. It's almost the same thing. Like, we've declared a variable, we can now change it, and that is exactly what I've done without realizing it. Is I'm changing target position each loop. It gets, if random range ended up being 1 1, we've added 1 to the x and z coordinates of target position. Next time round, it's starting from that. It's already offset by 1, and then we're adding our randomness on top. So that explains exactly what we're seeing, which is, if the first ones all tend to sort of veer towards the x direction, the subsequent ones also tend to cluster around x. They don't necessarily all go in x positive, maybe some go a bit further, but they're all kind of in a group, and the group itself shows like a overall bias. So fix is really easy. We just we find our accuracy here. We want target position is used here to check distance. That's correct. We do want to reference the real target position, but then rather than modify target position, we want to declare a new vector 3 where we'll call it maybe inaccurate position, and it will start out as being just target position, and then we'll modify this and shoot the bullet there. So that's just let's add the randomness to inaccurate position rather than target position, and then this line, new bullet transform.lookat, that's the one that actually aims the bullet. It says, hey, you point this direction, and then we let go and the bullet handles its own velocity. And we want to shoot at the inaccurate position. So yeah, all I'm doing there is I'm just each loop. So really the source of my confusion on this, and I'll dig into it because maybe you will suffer the same confusion. I've been doing this a while and it still trips me up. I know perfectly well what a loop is. I know that this is running this code, X times or whatever, however many iteration count is. But I think I missed this bug because in a way that I wouldn't have if you just took this code and just pasted it like that many times. I think if I was looking at that for the bug, it'd be like, oh yeah, target position is being changed here, then it's being changed here, then it's being changed here, and it never gets reset. When it's a loop, it's a little bit less plain. It's a little bit less obvious that that target position is getting set there, reset there, sort of, and then within the loop it's not normally. But we fix that now, so hopefully let's just check that works. Let's check I haven't done anything wrong. In the meantime, check it. Recording is still going all right. So shotgun, yeah, it's looking more consistent, isn't it? And if that's too accurate, we can decrease the accuracy. But the point is the kind of inaccuracy we want is the kind we're getting now, where there's no bias in the overall group. It's just that. Okay, so let's get that hierarchy view back up, and in our player we have this Uzi, rifle, shotgun. They're all just objects with the weapon behavior on them, and in fact they all have sort of multiple components to them, or multiple game objects within them, but the only one that really matters is the parent one that has the weapon behavior on it. These cylinders, first of all, they all look the same, which is kind of pointless as a visual thing, but they're not doing anything. That they don't even have any physicality to them. So what I want to do first, two things I want to do is I want to give the player a list of all the weapons they have so that they can cycle through them. Right now they don't have that, they just have this one slot, remember? On player there's this one slot for a weapon. We can't put all the weapons in there. We need another variable that can take a list of things, and that's called a list. And then I also want to make weapons into a prefab that we then vary in different ways. And I don't think we need to do that yet, so I think we'll do the list first. So if we go into player behavior, right now we've got public weapon behavior there. Now I want a list of weapons. I'm just going to write public list and then pointy brackets weapon behavior. I'll just call it the list weapons. And when you declare a list is a bit different to a normal variable type. It's kind of like actually taking a sheet of notepaper and putting it down on the desk when you declare this thing. You actually create something by declaring this, and the way we do that is we just say new. In fact, as I write the word new and then space, it suggests what we want to write, which is new list weapon behavior, and then we just put brackets after it. So we declare this variable and this list of variables really, and we actually need to sort of like create something. It has to be sort of I don't know if you call this instantiating it or initializing it or whatever. I think that's called a constructor anyway. You don't need to know any of that. As you can tell, I don't know it. Yeah, when you're making a list, you actually need to create something. So you have to write this new list, and then all this, list brackets weapon behavior is exactly what we said it was. And then these brackets afterwards, we've seen these on functions, obviously, on methods. And usually, often they have a parameter inside that's passing some information, and if there's no information to pass, then they're just empty. A good way to think of these is they are doing something. Whenever you see those brackets, we're doing something. Some code is going to be run as a result of this. When we do get component rigid body here, it doesn't just end on the pointy brackets, it has these brackets afterwards because we're actually doing something. We're asking some code to go and run and find us a rigid body. Whereas when we, if we set something to be, trying to find, if we just wanted to do something like cursor position equals vector 3.0, we don't do any brackets after that. It's not vector 3.0 with brackets because we don't need to, the vector 3 hotline that we're calling for this reference isn't going to do anything. It already has that information. It's not going to do any work. So it's never going to be critical for you to understand that. It just helps to remember, oh yeah, you've got to put brackets on the end of this because we're actually creating something. And I think we need another variable for which weapon we currently have selected. Now we already have that here, but the first thing we're going to want to do with this list of weapons is have a button that takes you to the next weapon. And what I want to do is I'm going to do a public int selected weapon index. Int, we mentioned this briefly before, it's short for integer and it just means a whole number. This is a case where it probably won't break if we make it a float, which is the normal kind of number we use, but we know for sure this number should never be a decimal, can never be a fraction, it doesn't make any sense. If you have a list of 5 weapons and you want to specify a weapon in that list, you can say weapon 3, you can say weapon 4, you can't say weapon 3.4, it just doesn't make any sense. And anytime it fundamentally doesn't make sense to have decimals, you probably want to use an int just to make sure if you ever accidentally do assign it to 3.4, the system will immediately tell you, you've done something wrong here. I don't know what you've done wrong, but this isn't what you think it is. And that's actually helpful. So, I don't think we need this weapon behavior, this thing anymore. And so I will delete it. And we made a bunch of complaints about that because we reference it, or just one. Let me see. Yeah, so selected weapon index in start, we're just going to set that to 0. So the first thing on our list, again, this is a programmer thing. Lists start with element 0, not element 1. And so if you have a 2-element list, the things in it will be element 0 and element 1. If you have a 3-element list, the things in it will be element 0, element 1, element 2. There'll be no element 3. And that's we did brush up against that, didn't we? What was the it was in the iteration count thing. So yeah, iteration count this is very much like cycling through a list. We actually don't have a list in particular that we're using here, but yeah, it starts at 0 and it stops before the number of elements that's in it. And then, so we've got this error, we've got to fix this now. Now that we're using a list, we can refer to the list and we want to specify, we mean the first thing in this list. We want the, no, sorry, not the first thing. We want the selected one. So if we have these 5 guns and we've selected gun 3, we want gun 3 to fire. And the way you do that is square brackets, yet another kind of bracket. Every kind of bracket on your keyboard is used in programming. And when you are trying to specify an element of a list, it's square brackets. There is, I'll just mention as an aside, if you've ever heard of arrays in programming, lists are much like arrays. I don't think we will ever have any reason to use arrays. There's no need for you to know about those two different things. They're better at managing memory. It's kind of about like an array is sort of set in stone and the list is more flexible and can change more during runtime, which in theory, performs slightly less well in some kind of memory management sense that I have never understood, will never understand, have never needed to understand. So you just forget about arrays, just use lists. That's my advice. I've written something that's completely bizarre there. I've told that weapon 3 is going to fire. We obviously don't want weapon 3 to always be the one we fire. We want whatever we have selected to fire. And like I say, on startup, that's 0, so it's the first element in the list. And so right now we'll just fire the first one. So we don't yet have any code to switch weapons, but this code will work like our old code, but it uses a list which at least supports our ability to switch between weapons. So now when I go back to player behavior, we're going to lose that reference to a shotgun because I deleted that variable. Now we've got this little weapons drop down. It says size. It's a kind of slightly confusing word. It means how many elements in this list, and right now there's 0. You can like type things in here and change the size of the list that way. I don't do it that way if I can help it because it's a bit manual and weird. There's actually quite a neat way we can get all these weapons in the list. What I want to do is select these 3 things. I hope you can see my cursor. I actually don't see... sorry, let me just check that this thing is working. This is my app to highlight the cursor. I think it had sort of gone to sleep. And if I switch back to OBS, I should be able to tell whether you can see it. Yes, you can. Yeah, so this list down here, I want to grab all these and drag them into this list. If I do that, here we go. I'm going to drag them over. Oh no, I can't, because by selecting those, I've caused those to be the thing in the inspector. So there's a little trick to help you with that, because this is often the thing you want to do. You want to drag something from, it could be from the project folder as well, into here, but as soon as you click it, you lose this view this view over here, because you've selected something else that it thinks you want to inspect. And so to avoid that, you can lock the inspector. There's a little lock icon in the top right here. I click that, and now it will stay on that until I unclick that. So I think I can just grab all three of these, drag them in over to where it says weapons. I'm going to drop it on the word weapons there, and there's a little plus icon to see that it's going to work. And they all go in. So now if I just play our game, we can see element 0 is the Uzi, and remember we initialize selected weapon. Selected weapon index is right there. So we fire the Uzi first. Yeah, that's our Uzi. And we could actually change weapons in the inspector like this. That'll be the rifle, and then if we change selected weapon index to, not 3, sorry, 2. I just fell foul of that thing I warned you about. That's a shotgun. Okay, so we could already do that. So that's not very good yet, but it's cool that we haven't broken anything yet. It's always a plus. While we're here, I noticed, look, we still have this second between shots and second since last shot variables. We don't need those anymore, right? Those are on the weapons. The player doesn't have those. So if I delete this, it's going to complain that these things are not defined, but that's fine. That's just where we initialized it. We can delete that too. And yeah, we don't want any of those references. So our player class got a bit simpler, which is nice. So now, our firing code is we look for fire 1, which is the left mouse button, and then we do this. Let's just copy and paste all that. Get rid of the word firing. Change that to fire 2, which is right mouse. We should at some point rename these inputs, because you can choose what they're called, and that's a ridiculous thing to call it. Even more so than the other one. And now what we want to do is selected weapon index increased by 1, but we'll hit a problem here, because what if we're already on the last element of the list? If we're in the last thing on the list, then we add 1 to it, we've gone out of range, and the game will crash when we do that. And that's a nasty kind of thing. It's a thing you want to watch out for, because what I've written is fine. The Visual Studio doesn't know I've written anything that can crash yet. I mean, it probably could tell that it can crash, but it doesn't warn you about it, because it's not invalid code. It doesn't not make sense, but you've created a situation where it can crash while you're playing. And those crashes kind of cost you more time, because you don't realize you've broken anything until you actually try it, and then you discover you've broken something. And yeah, it's much nicer when you get a red underline that's kind of... that's a nice error, because you're being told right away, so you fix it right away. Anyway, be careful about indexes going out of range. So what we want to say is if selected weapon index is greater than or equal to how many weapons do we have, which is weapons, that's our list, and then we say count. Count is, if we have 3 weapons on our list, count is 3. If we have 1 weapon on our list, count is 1. And the reason we don't even want to let selected weapon index get as much as that, because remember we start at 0. So if we have 1 element in our list, 1 is an invalid index. It can never be 1. It's got to be less than 1. And then we'll just do, if we've gone too far, just start at 0. Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? So now we should be able to switch through weapons just by right-clicking. So start with the Uzi, right-click, shotgun. So that's not right, is it? It's good that it's switch weapon, but look at our list. Uzi, rifle, shotgun. We skipped over rifle. I know why that is. It's because I just copy and pasted our firing code. Our firing code is fine with us holding down the button. What that says is all the time the fire is held, constantly do this. So we've just said all the time right mouse is held, constantly change weapon. And so that means how long you hold it for is going to have change which weapon you switch to. And actually we don't want that at all, do we? I think we want get button down. So that will only, if I hold the right mouse for like 3 seconds, this still only happens once. It's when the mouse goes down, when the button goes down. And there's also one for get button up. That means when you release the mouse button. We want to use down because it's sooner. As soon as we know you want to switch weapon, let's do it. So now I should see the correct sequence. Uzi, right-click, rifle, right-click, shotgun, right-click, Uzi, right-click, rifle. Cool. apologise for the street noise. I don't know how loud that's coming through to you. So that's pretty cool. But now I want you to be able to pick up weapons. And I think we should make weapons a prefab. Because we're going to start doing some stuff to them that will want to be true for all of them. And how will it work? I think we'll want... I can't remember. Is it rigid bodies or colliders the way you set whether it's a trigger? It's a collider. Okay. Okay. Let's start by just pulling out. Let's just pull out one of them, the shotgun. Okay. So what I'm doing here is dragging it. Right now it's nested under the player. You know, it's kind of attached to the player, and I'm dragging it just to the scene in general, which basically makes it unparented from the player, takes it out of the player's hierarchy. Really, you can think of this as I've made it a child of the scene rather than a child of anything else, which everything is. Maybe that's just an abstract and weird way to think about it. But anyway, that's how you drag something out. You can probably just drag... Can you just drag it to the bottom of the list? Oh yeah, that works too. Okay, so you can do it that way as well. I'll let that happen actually because neither of these weapons... I'd like both these weapons to be pick-upable. But I want to deal with just one at the moment. So let's go to our scene tab. Hit F there to focus on what I have selected. And of course they're still inside the player. When you unparent it, it doesn't move. It stays where it is. But now let's move over here. And we're going to make it a prefab, are we? Yes, let's do that. So I guess maybe we should start with the rifle, which is going to be like this. Yeah, it does make sense to make these prefabs. So I'm just going to rename rifle weapon. This is our least interesting weapon, so I'm going to use this as the standard one. I'm going to drag this to our project folder to make it a prefab. And I'm keeping these around for now just as for reference points so we can look at their stats. But I might... So if I select them and then I check this box... Oh, excuse me. Okay, so an important point to say about locking the inspector is you do have to remember to click that lock thing again to unlock it later, otherwise you get confused, like I just did. I'm going to select these ones that aren't prefabs yet and just uncheck the box here. This box is just enabled the whole thing. If you disable something, it's no longer. It's as if you deleted it for now, but you can still bring it back. Okay, so we have a weapon prefab now, and I'm going to name it. This one was rifle, wasn't it? So I've renamed the instance. I haven't renamed the prefab. The prefab remains weapon, and they're all gold at the moment. I guess that's okay for now. And we want to do something to its collider. Ah, yes, okay. So, right now, if I recall correctly, when this thing was, where is the player? If we put the player at 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, and put the rifle there as well. The rifle is kind of embedded in you. That's a bit weird. We might want to move the cylinder out so that it's not... So that kind of what you see is what you get. If it's going to be lying on the ground, it should look as long as it is. Right now it looks twice as long as it will be when you're holding it, because half of it is embedded in your body, which is just kind of weird. So let's not do that. Of course, at that point it becomes rather large, so we could shrink it in general. Yeah, that's probably right. And just move it in here. So I've set its reference. Sorry, I've set the coordinates of the base game object to the same as the player, so that just as a reference point, just so I can see how it will look when the player is carrying it. And now that I've done that, I can move it out, and it can just lie around wherever. I actually. I'm thinking about what I want to add a collider to this now, because we took the collider off last time, And that was actually a bit hasty. I kind of need a collider now. I don't want this gun to physically hit enemies or collide with the bullets it's firing or anything like that. But now that it's a thing that's lying on the ground, we do want to be able to pick it up. And to do that, we can detect collision the same way we can when an enemy bumps into you. So I guess the easiest way to do this is just to add. So if I go to add component, it was a capsule collider that had on it. Even though it's a cylinder, you give it a capsule collider. I think there is no such thing as a cylinder collider. And when I add that, we will see it basically matches the size. It's a little bit smaller than the weapon. We can make that bigger if we like. But I'm not going to leave. I'm going to leave it alone because it'll be fine. Okay, so now our rifle sits on the ground. It's got a weapon behavior still, and now it's got a collider. Oh yes, this. Okay, yeah. I have edited the instance and not the prefab. I think we will never. We might want to change what kind of, physical bit the weapon has, physical appearance, barrels and that kind of thing. We might want that to be different for each weapon. But in the main prefab, we might as well we'll never want a cylinder that doesn't have a collider, because like I say, I want them to be able to be collided with. So actually, this change we just made, it probably should have been made in the prefab itself. So there's two ways I can do this. I can just apply it to the weapon prefab. Let's do that just to kind of teach that. So I've made a change to an instance. I want it to actually apply to all of the prefab. So I can go to, just a recap, I clicked on the cog there, and then added component, because it's, one way I've noticed that I was doing this is there's a little plus icon on that, which is not normally there. That's saying this was added to, this prefab wouldn't normally have this. It's been specifically added just to this instance. So I go to added component, and say apply to prefab weapon, and that plus disappears. And because I shouldn't have been doing this in the first place, let's open up weapon, and this is what I should have been editing. Is that? Oh, all of our changes were just on the instance, weren't they? Yeah, we probably want all of those to apply to the prefab as well. Okay, so this is another good learning opportunity because I lost track of what I was doing. Yeah, all those changes about, like, I want the weapon to kind of start roughly where the front of the player is. Again, we might not have every weapon look like this, but if the prefab looks like this, it's a good reference point, because then when we replace this gold cylinder with, a grey box or something, we know where the grey box should be. It should be where that gold cylinder is. So every change I've made so far, I actually want all of those to apply to the thing, except for the name, I suppose. So there's a way of doing that. When I click on the rifle, there's this overrides thing. An override is what they call a difference you've made to the instance that is not in the prefab currently. You've overridden the thing. And I can just say apply all. And then when I open the weapon, now we've got that same pattern where the position of the weapon itself is different to the position of the cylinder. That's good, yes. Sorry about that, should have been editing the prefab all along. Something I don't like here is that when I'm editing a prefab, it doesn't really matter what the position is there, but I don't like it to not be 0, 0, 0. Because it's just a rule. And definitely if changing that broke something here, that would be a big warning sign that we've done something wrong. So yeah, I like the base game object of any prefab to be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay. So one reason I wanted to make this do all the stuff in the prefab rather than the instance is there's a change we want to make here. When it's not just about adding a capsule collider, we also want to check is trigger. Because, like I say, I don't want this weapon to actually physically bump into stuff, but when the player touches it, I want them to pick it up. So, let's do that. In the player behavior, remember how when an enemy touches us, actually we've used triggers before, haven't we? If I just look for on trigger, enter. Yes, the explosion. Yeah, the explosion is also not because of physics object in the traditional sense, but we want to know when it hits something with a health system, and so we did on trigger enter there. And for the player, I want to do something similar. I want to do on trigger enter, and once it recognized that I was typing that, I just hit enter and it filled out all the rest of that stuff. And now I'm only looking for weapons. And so what I want to know is, does the thing we collided with have a weapon component? But there's a gotcha here, because when I collide with a trigger, this will happen when I bump into that weapon, but it will give us a collider. It's going to give us a collider called other, and that's the collider we hit. Now look at our weapon prefab. The collider is on the cylinder. The cylinder doesn't have a weapon component. So if we go looking for a weapon component, it's going to say, no, we don't have one. The weapon component is in its parent. But luckily there is a specific function for checking that. So what we're going to do is we're going to declare a variable called their weapon, and it's going to equal other, which is the collider, dot, now it's not just going to be get component, it's going to be get component in parent. Is that what it's called? Yes. Weapon behavior. And again, brackets because we're doing something. So that says, oh, we bumped into a collider? Well, ask that collider, does your parent have a weapon behavior? Are your parents home, ma'am? And do they have a weapon? And that's what we want to know. And so here I've declared a variable and I've stored what their weapon is. Hey, ask your parents, do they have a weapon? Do they have a gun in the house? And if so, bring it here. And that person we've just asked, that collider we've just asked, will either return to us a gun or they will return to us nothing. And so we want to check for that. Is their weapon not equal to null? We've done that before, right? The not equals thing. Yes, in fact, this is exactly like what we did with our explosion. We defined a variable, we went looking for a component, and if we find it, we store it at this variable. Then we check if the variable's null, and then we do something with it. That's exactly what we're going to do here. Ask your parents if they have a gun. If you came back to us with something that wasn't empty, in other words, you did bring us a gun, then let's do something with that gun. Let's pick it up. So at the very basic level, we should weapons.add brackets their weapon. So that says our weapons list. Yeah, maybe I should have called this weapons list. But anyway, weapons is the name of our list. I'm not going to rename it right now because I think we'll lose everything that's in the list if I do. And to avoid that, we'd have to do that formally serialized as trick, which I think was just more trouble than it's worth, to teach at least. So we want to add their weapon. That will put it in our list. It will have a strange effect, I think. I might just demonstrate it because it's going to be fun, I think. Let me first go back to our scene. I'm going to hit Control S right now to save our scene. And what have we got? We've dropped the rifle, we've got the Uzi. The player right now has no weapon at all. I am gonna just, with their weapon list, I'm just gonna make size 0. And so there's nothing in it. And we should find that this crashes because I think it'll crash as soon as I fire. Yeah, because it's gonna tell us that argument out of range. It must be non-negative and less than the size of the collection. If we double-click that, it's going to jump us to the code where we fire. It's actually not jumping us there, but I will do it. And so we're trying to fire a weapon without even checking if we have any weapons. So let's first, in this input get button fire thing, let's check that weapons.count is greater than 0. And input get button fire. Have we used an AND statement before like that? If we haven't, when you want to check 2 conditions at once, both these things need to be true before we fire. Both weapons, we need to have some weapons. The count of the weapons we have has to be more than 0. And we want to check, is the button being pressed? And That's just 2 ampersands in a row. It just means and. So that should fix our crash, and then that'll let us see the other problem. If it'll ever let me click play. Okay, so left clicking doesn't break the game now. And I'm going to pause just to show that what just happened was what I expected, which is when I bumped into that rifle, it did add it to our list. Remember, this list was empty, I just cleared it. When I bumped into it, that popped up. So it's in our list now, but you'll notice it's still on the ground. So when I fire, it's going to... It does fire towards the cursor, but it fires out of the rifle that's just lying there. It's not coming out of me at all, which is a bit of a problem. So we should actually pick that weapon up. And so that's not as simple as... we could do weapons, not weapons, their weapon, dot transform dot position equals our transform dot position. That's fine, it would teleport it to us, but it's not going to keep it there. So, shall we do that anyway? Yeah, I think that this is it. We will do this, and transform rotation will be our rotation. But we also need to parent it to us. Remember, that's the difference. That was what made them walk around with us and stay attached to us, was they were parented to us. And to do that in code, we do their weapon .transform .set parent. And then in brackets, what is its parent going to be? It's going to be us, but actually parenting is always about the transforms. It's the transform that's parented to the transform. In fact, that's why we're accessing their transform, is because that's how parenting works. It's not the game object that's parented, it's the transform that's parented. It makes sense to say that the game object is parented to the other game object as well, but in code, when you actually say, what is my parent, the answer is going to be a transform. So that teleports it to us, makes it face our direction, and then it sets the parent. Let's see if that works. If that's unreliable in any way, there's a different way we could do it. We could set its parent, and then we could set its local position and its local rotation to 0. But I figure there's no point in learning that different other way of doing it if code we already know can do the job. Let's see if that does work. Yeah, look at that. Picked up a gun. Okay, cool. So now, I think I will make new weapons for the Uzi and the shotgun. So if I drag weapon prefab into the scene somewhere, and we're going to do a Y coordinate of 1, and move it over here. Okay, let's make this one the new shotgun. So I'm making them anew because these ones weren't built in our prefab. The shotgun and the Uzi that we made, we made them all wholesale. We made 3 different things that were all very similar to each other, but they weren't prefabs, which was silly really. We should have made a prefab. Anytime you want lots of things to have a lot in common, they should be based on the same prefab, because then Unity will be keeping track of where there are differences and where there are similarities, and we can change them all at once and things like that. So I want this new shotgun's stats to be the same as the old shotgun, so I go to the old shotgun, and on weapon behavior you can click down here and say copy component, and a new shotgun already has a weapon behavior component, so I'm not going to remove it or add a new one. When I click the cog now, paste component values is there, and when I do that, it's going to change all its values to the same as the old shotgun. And those have gone bold. That is to remind us, in fact there's a little blue highlight, I haven't noticed that before. That is to tell us this is different to the prefab. We've changed something on the instance that's different to the rest. And if we change, so A, that means we haven't altered the prefab by doing this, and also it means that if the prefab now changed what its base accuracy is, it's not going to affect us because we override those. Those are overrides. And if I click that overrides button, it's going to, oh, look at that, that's nice. So let's do that again. When I click the overrides button, it gives us a list of everything that has been changed at all. It tells us the weapon behavior has been changed. When I click on that, it actually details what the changes are. It says, hey, look, in the prefab source, these things are 1,000, 0.5, and 1. In this instance, this override, we're doing 5, 1, and 10. Good to know. So I also wanted to make it look different, because at this point it's impossible to tell which one is the rifle and which one's the shotgun. Let us... we're in game view, aren't we? What should a shotgun look like? Let's take... Maybe this whole thing should be slightly stouter. And it could be less tall. Don't know about that. But the main thing I want to do was let's duplicate the cylinder. And I've clicked the rotate tool here, and I'm hoping there's a... Is it the blue one? Yeah. Is this going to work? Rotate it a bit like that, and then kind of have it coming out like that. I'm trying to make a sort of cluster of 3 of these things. And then if I duplicate that, I could just change its rotation. Right, I set that in the editor, but now it says it's -18, so if we do +18, that should work. And then its offset, which is going to be X, I think. What if that was negative? I don't know if this is the right thing to do at all. Yeah, that works. Okay, that's a terrible shotgun. That didn't work at all like I hoped. What do we think? Is it clear which is which? Sort of. You know what? Maybe they just shouldn't be rotated. Maybe they should all be 0, 0, 0. Is that better? The fact that this material is slightly transparent is really messing with everything. Are they also... They're offset forwards too. Okay, this is all fiddling. You can do this however you like. And another thing I want to do, I don't really like this material for the shotgun. So that was our explosion material. I'm going to click that in our project folder and do Control-D to duplicate it. Get a new one. When you see, I'm finding with metallic stuff, sometimes it comes out super dark. It's not actually a problem. It hasn't really done that. Next time you run Unity, it probably won't be dark. Next time I click play, it might not be dark. I don't know, it's just a temporary glitch. And the fact that this is transparent is weird. Let's not make it transparent. And also it's orange. Let's make it grey. Maybe quite a pale one. We could even make it less metallic. The metal's pretty good. And then, yeah, let's drag that onto our cylinders. Yeah, you can see that's way lighter in the game, isn't it, than what the material view is showing. And now I can actually see much more clearly what I've done. How this is slightly wrong. Okay. Good enough. Yeah, so that's the shotgun now. So let's check if that works. If I pick up the shotgun. Yeah, look at that. That feels kind of nice. And then I pick up the rifle. And okay, we do have a problem. And the problem is both exist at once. Actually, it's not a bad... it's not a worse look than what we had. I can still switch between them. They still work fine, but I forgot that right now they all show. So let's actually do some... Really, when we switch weapons, what we want to do is more than just change one variable, right? We need to disable some weapons and enable others. Remember how when I had those outdated Uzi and shotgun objects and I just unchecked them? That's what we want to do to our weapons that we're not currently using. We don't want to destroy them, we don't want to throw them away, we don't want to shrink them or hide them or, you know, put them in the ground or anything. We can leave them exactly where we are. Their position is correct. They should still be our children. Our guns are our children is an interesting thing you find yourself saying in programming. And we just want to turn them off for a bit. Just turn off, and we'll bring you back later. So this is kind of good because if we can declare a new method, a new function, private void change weapon index. And then brackets, we're going to say int index. And this code here that we do, this is weapon switching. Let's move all of that into here. And in fact, I copied that rather than pasting it. Basically, this thing is now going to, instead of increasing the weapon index, it's going to run a function and pass in, okay, whatever our current index is, that plus 1. Change our weapon index to our current weapon index plus 1. And then this function, change weapon index, anytime we want to change weapon index, we always care about, did we go out of range? Did we make it too big? Are we talking about a nonsense weapon index? We'd always want to check that, right? So it's good to have that in a separate function, so that any time weapon index gets changed, this runs and it checks, did we change to a valid index? This line is wrong now. We're not always going to increase the index. We're going to, we've been given an index, so we check is, I guess let's do select weapon index equals index. We set it to whatever we've been told, then we check, wait, did we go too far? If we went too far, then set it back to 0. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a slightly different way we could have done that, but I don't think it's meaningfully better. Why did we do that just now? Oh yeah, because there's other stuff we want to do, right? After we've changed weapons, we want to disable any weapons that are not our selected one. And we can do that with a loop, like we did for firing. So when we fired, we did this for loop. And I'm going to copy, let's copy the essence of that. So after we change weapons, we're going to do a for loop, and we will, I'm just going to call the variable I this time. That is what you'll more commonly be using in programming. We declare this counter variable and set it to 0. We don't want it to go as high as a certain value. What value would that be? Weapons.count, because we don't want it to go out of the range of the list we're cycling through. And for each thing in the weapons list, we're going to check. So in this case, this I, it used to be our iteration count, right? For shotguns, we're making 10 projectiles. We want to count how many projectiles have we made so far, what projectile are we on right now. We were counting the number of iterations we've done. Here it is that, but it also happens to be the index of the thing we're accessing. So from within this loop, if I say weapons I, that is the weapon we're looking at right now. As we go through the list, if we're on our second iteration, we're looking at weapon number 2, or weapon number 1, because of that weird 0 rule. So what we're interested in is, that's how we would access the weapon we're talking about. But first we want to check if I equals selected weapon index, then we want to make sure that weapons I is active. So we can do, excuse me, we want to turn on, when I unchecked those outdated shotgun and Uzi, I checked this thing. That is on the game object, right? It's not on the weapon behavior. I don't want to just disable the weapon behavior, I want to disable the game object. So when we have the weapon we want to go to its game object and then say set active true. So as we go through the list, when we find the index that we're currently on, let's say it's 2, then weapon number 2, your game object should be active. If the one we're looking at right now is not the weapon that we have selected, then we want weapons I game object set active to false. So if it is our current weapon, turn it on. If it isn't our current weapon, turn it off. So I'll comment this a bit better. For each weapon in our list, let's do change our index If it's gone too far, loop back around. Then for each weapon on a list, if it's the one we just selected, make it visible, enable it, and if it's not the one we just selected, hide it, disable it. And I know the function says set active. That's my expression about that. Yeah, I call it enabling and disabling because, importantly, there is, just like there's on trigger enter, there's also on enable, and don't write this, on disable. And those are functions we'll definitely be using at some point. They're really useful. And that happens when you uncheck that box or when you check that box. It also happens when you destroy something or create something. And yeah, so set active is just how you change whether something's enabled or not. And disabling things is a really good way to both hide them, and also when something is disabled, it's not going to run its update function. It's not going to be doing stuff of its own accord. It does still exist, and you can still tell it to do things. I don't know that we'll be doing that anytime soon, but yeah, just so you know, it's not like you deleted it. It's like you put it to sleep. It's like you said, hey, we don't need you right now. Like you put it to sleep and also made it invisible. Here's your cloak of invisibility. Take a nap. We'll tell you when we need to wake you up. And yeah, in some situations, you can actually like prod the thing and say, hey, while you're asleep, just do this. But it's asleep and it's not going to do anything of its own accord. So, does that all work? Change weapon index is going to be index +1. The change weapon index method now checks whether that index is valid, and if not, it fixes it. Then it's going to change the visibility of our weapons. And we saw why that's necessary. It looks dumb if all your selected weapons are all active at once. Okay. Okay. So the weapon changing code does work, but you probably noticed it didn't work at first, right? When I first picked it up, we still saw all the weapons at once, and we could. So the over-engineering solution to this would be, okay, well now this visibility function, we split it off into its own function, and then we run that function both on weapon select and also on weapon pickup. But actually, I don't think we need to do that, because I think when you pick up a weapon, you probably want to use it. We might need to rethink this if we ever add like rocket launchers or something, where switching to that weapon unexpectedly could cause you to damage yourself. But in this game, it's generally when you're picking up a weapon, it's going to be a good thing where you want to use the weapon. So we might as well just, in this script where we hit their trigger, why not just change weapon index to whatever the latest one is. When we add something to a list, it's going to go in at the last position, the end position, the highest number. And what's the highest number in a list? It's weapons.count -1. Remember, count is never used as an index, it's too high. We always stop before we get to the count. In a 3-item list, we're going to stop at 2. And so if we had 2 weapons and we just picked up a third, after we've picked it up, we've already added it to the list here. This is where we add it. And let's comment this actually. Add it to our internal list. Move it to our location, and then parent it to us, attach it to us, so it moves with us. And then also select it. Yeah, so we had 2 guns, we've walked into a third, we've picked it up, we've put it on our back kind of thing, we've put it in our hands, I guess. And now our weapons.count is going to be 3, because we had 2, now we've got 3, our count is 3. What is the index of the new one we just picked up? It's going to be 2, because our existing weapons are 0 and 1, and we just picked up a new one, it's going to go in slot 2. So it's a little bit weird that they're all off by 1, but hopefully that makes sense. Let's see if it worked. So now pick up the second weapon, and I just switch to it. And we've got no weapons overlapping or anything. Cool, that all worked. and we can switch between them still. There's just 2 more little things to do. I will create an Uzi the same way I created the shotgun. I'm just going to drag from weapon into the scene. Once we find it, we're going to give it Y coordinate of 1, and I'll name it Uzi, and move it out from the player, put it somewhere else, and then I'd like to change its appearance, of course. This one, let's see, if the rifle is kind of longer and thinner, maybe this is, oh no, I moved it instead of resizing it. Maybe this is going to be stouter, and that's all I can think of. Honestly, I'm not an artist. I'm certainly not a 3D modeler. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Should we just make it red? Then it's different enough. And then the main thing is all our stats. We want to go to that disabled Uzi, and I'm going to copy its component, its weapon component, then go to our new nice prefab conformant Uzi and paste component values, and now it will behave much like our old one. And I'm just going to delete those old and disabled ones now. So let's just check that works. Pick up the rifle, pick up the Uzi, pick up the shotgun. They all look different, they can all be picked up. I can switch between them. And yeah, that's it. Okay, so we're basically done. There's one other thing I want to do that's not really a new feature. It's something we can already do, but I just never thought to do it before. This rifle kind of sucks, right? It's accurate, but who cares about accuracy in this game? This game's about hordes of things. It should at least be more powerful. Now, we could modify our weapon behavior script to add a field for damage and put that in there. But actually, our bullet already has a field for damage, right? Do you remember bullet behavior? Here, it's got bullet speed, seconds till destroy, damage. We already made that valuable. We already made that a variable. We were smart. We foresaw this problem. So actually, all we need to do for a rifle, if we want to make it more powerful, we just need to make a new bullet prefab. So I can just go to our bullet prefab in our project folder and hit Control D, and I'm going to rename it to rifle bullet. And this has another cool consequence, which is if I open that new prefab, change its damage to 2. I guess make it 3 actually. But I notice bullet speed is also a variable we can change. So we could just make it twice as fast as well. And now it will feel like it's higher velocity. Oh hell, let's just make it red too. Let's make everything red. Hang on, I need to scroll down in the inspector view so that it gets to this blank space. Remember, when you assign a material, you've got to drag it to this like limbo zone below everything else. Maybe it should be gold actually. Golden bullet, that's a thing. I've done that, but I haven't hooked it up yet, so why am I playing it? Rifle. Oh, and the rifle is already gold, right? Yeah, cool, so this makes sense. So its weapon behavior has a reference to bullet prefab. We're just going to drag in the rifle bullet instead. And now when we play, pick it up and fires these really fast gold bullets. It actually looks really dark, doesn't it? But that's kind of cool. Like killing these things in one hit is nice. Can't seem to hit that one. And switch to shotgun, back to the less powerful white bullets. And we can imagine like the Uzi might want to have different damage values to the shotgun. I really want to do that not because it's important to our game balance yet, but just so that once you know you can do that, that gives you a lot more flexibility to play around and customize your own game however you want it.